Well, welcome back, everyone. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Gabe Saint, a Turning Point USA president at the University of Wyoming. Stay with us today as we dive into topics ranging from the capture of Nicolas Maduro to the fraud in Minnesota. Let's get into it. This is the Martin Memo. The Martin Memo. All right, Gabe. Well, first of all, it is great to have you on here today. How are we feeling?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So obviously, we've talked just a little bit, kind of coordinating this and some topics that we wanted to go over today. But for those of the individuals who don't know you, just tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Gabe Saint. I'm a Wyoming native, lived in Wyoming all my life. Reddest state in the country, but I go to the University of Wyoming. Just got done with my first semester of law school. I've been running the Turning Point USA chapter there for the last 4 years. Done a lot of big things. We brought Riley Gaines, fought transgenderism on campus. We actually had a transgender join a sorority on our campus that made national headlines. Crazy. We brought Charlie Kirk last April. Worked up really hard to bring him, and we've influenced state policy, helped change laws in the state of Wyoming, like abolishing DEI, and we passed free speech policy for the university. So we're a powerhouse chapter for sure. That's basically
Apparently,
all who I am. Yeah.
wow. Yeah, that's it. There's nothing more you want to add to that wonderful resume?
Now, just kind of a ranch kid. So
I love it. I love it. Um, with that being said, we talked about the hottest topic of today. I mean, you pick your choice between Minnesota and Somalia fraud to Nicolas Maduro. But today we're going to start out with the capture of Nicolas Maduro. From a conservative perspective, how does this redefine American strength on the global stage?
yeah, I think that this Venezuela, the capture of Nicolas Maduro, has to do a lot with actually the debate we've been having within conservatism since really Trump got elected. We all see the huge divide, and a lot of like the more libertine types and that crowd. They were saying, "Oh, I thought America First and MAGA was against an intervention like this," and I think that that's where ideology goes to fail is that we ought to follow one kind of idea that we're never ever going to intervene, because it's bad for America or whatever. But I think that the Venezuela situation is very, very different from our interventions in the Middle East and in Europe, where I think you could easily argue that our interventions over there were not for the good of America and her people. They don't benefit us, they don't advance our interests. The more we're over there, the more entrenched we get economically, politically, diplomatically, and militarily. And we get a lot of refugees. This Islam talk, we kind of wonder why a bunch of Muslims are coming to the West. It's because the West has been blowing up Europe for the better part of 25 years. I mean, blowing up the Middle East for the better part of 25 years. So the Venezuela situation, I think it goes to show that America is reevaluating where it should prioritize its military power, which is in our own hemisphere. I think in the future, we need to make sure our backyard's cleaned up and that we aren't having drugs and narco terrorists coming across the border, messing everything up. So I think that's just America showing, look, this is still our hemisphere. It's Russia and China and Iran and whoever's an adversary doesn't get to mess around on our side of the globe.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly the feeling. Now, suddenly, instead of no kings, now they're all in favor of a king or a dictator. So it's unreal. So, for years, critics called narco terrorism charges against Maduro a reach. They didn't believe in it. Now that he's in a New York cell, how does this justify the administration's hardline stance on South American cartels?
Yeah, well, I think that as Maduro goes on trial, I think that the government will definitely present its evidence, and I think it's pretty obvious that Venezuela um, and Maduro were definitely trafficked in drugs like cocaine. Not so much fentanyl. That's more of a Mexican thing, but he definitely trafficked cocaine. And how that goes with critics, I don't know. I think it's pretty obvious. I think that's just what are those Trump derangement syndrome to say that Maduro and his regime and the cartels in Venezuela weren't trafficking drugs into America. Are you kidding me? You go to any college campus and find cocaine. That ain't grown in America. It's coming from South America and
Yeah.
Latin America. So I think it's utterly ridiculous in that sense.
What do you say to the individuals out there who say that this is all about the oil, that the US only wants the oil, it's not about regime change, it's not about stopping drugs, it's just about the oil? What do you say to critics?
Well, I think that's just like them trying to play off like the Dick Cheney criticism is that Dick Cheney only wanted to go over there for oil, which is probably true, and he had other interests. But I think in this situation, I think Americans actually felt they were affected greatly by the Maduro regime with immigration, with drugs. Like the average American has experienced something in regard to Venezuela and that regime.
Yeah.
And when it comes to oil and Venezuela's gold, they have huge reserves of both. I'm kind of an American imperialist myself, as long as it's efficient imperialism, America forever. And so when it comes to that, and the Western Hemisphere is ours, and I'm totally okay with taking all their stuff. So
Yeah.
I think if we're gonna go in there, take oil. Now, do I necessarily want the United States government to do that? No, but I definitely think we should open up the Venezuelan market for American and American or oil companies and gold mining companies. Let them go in there, and that's the best way to rebuild infrastructure is with private companies. So I'm like, take all their stuff. Who cares? This is America. This is our hemisphere. We are the empire, and I think that's the mentality we have to have.
Agreed. I want to get one more question in on this, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next topic. People have argued that this is like the Monroe Doctrine 2.0. Does this operation send a final, maybe definitive warning to adversaries like China or Russia that the Western Hemisphere is not open for their influence?
I don't know about definitive, but I definitely think it's a reminder. I think America, even in its worst moments in the last 80 years, has always been able to demonstrate our military prowess, our military might, whether that's the first Gulf War going into Iraq and Afghanistan, what we did in Lebanon and Syria and Libya and Somalia and Yemen. We've always been able to demonstrate that we are very efficient militarily. So but I do think it's a reminder, and I think maybe it is definitive in the aspect that we haven't done something like this in our hemisphere in quite a while. That we are willing to, have military operations on this side of the globe too.
Right.
I think what will be more telling is how the administration and the government handle going forward. We have not been able to demonstrate that we're able to handle a post-strike situation when it comes to like propping up a new government or election. So we need to handle that right so that people respect us, that we can control things after that.
Want to go ahead and move on to the Somali fraud scandal in Minnesota, which finally Governor Tim Walz is stepping down, which he should have a long time ago. It's very scary to see that we were this close to having him being second in the chain of command for the entire United States. So that's just absolutely mind-boggling that that almost occurred. But this case exposes massive abuse of taxpayer dollars in welfare programs with ties to immigration and oversight failures.
There's really 2 points revolving around this in the average American's mind is why the hell am I paying taxes if it's not even going towards Americans? Because
Right.
I think the average guy is probably fine with, these entitlement programs and welfare programs. People that aren't very political are okay with that. But when they find out that all this entitlement money is going towards non-Americans, refugees, people with protected statuses, they're kind of like, what the heck? Why am I even paying taxes? Trump just posted a thing on True Social of like a graphic of the percentage of people from various countries, how many of them are on welfare, and it's crazy. Somewhere like 60% of people from certain countries are on entitlement programs, and it shouldn't be that way. And so I think out of it, I think there needs to be investigations in every state, even in states like Wyoming. I'm sure there's some group taking advantage of some program. Not that we have many programs in my state. You're kind of cooked if you're poor in my state, but ooh. Uh, but yeah, I think that's the question in everybody's mind is why am I paying taxes? And I think the second point is, will something actually happen? Because if we remember back during COVID, there were these programs that groups like this were taking advantage of, and nothing really happened out of that. And so we'll see if there's actually something that comes out of this administration. I think, everybody's talking about 2026. If they want to win in 2026, we need real action from the Congress, from the president. And frankly, I think the vice president, he has a lot of good rhetoric. I'd like to see him use all the influence he has to really do something, show that he can lead if he really wants to be the leader.
Yeah. And investigations now are pointing up to 9 billion in total fraud, potentially 14, much of it involving Somali immigrant networks and phony daycares. How do these schemes operate?
Yeah, it is very interesting. Because I think the average guy goes, man, it must be really, really hard to commit fraud, but it really isn't. You just got to fill out paperwork a certain way. You can lie straight on the sheet. Nobody's going to check to see if what you put on paper is true. So they could take advantage of really any government program, whether that's an entitlement program or some like federal grant or anything like that. So all they got to do, and I think what's his face? James O'Keefe, he's been doing this for how long, exposing things like this, and time again, he shows how they expose it. Is that they just get, a piece of paperwork and they'll obfuscate what their business actually is. Like his very first story, he talked about it at Amfest, was about exposing a prostitution ring in D.C. And people were just putting down crazy things, saying it was a legitimate business. But and that's how they do it, is that they just lie on the paper and nobody in the state governments check it. They just, yeah.
Do you think this is going to tarnish Tim Walz's legacy? Do you think there has to be a lot more to harm it, or what's your whole feeling on that?
Um, I don't. He'll definitely be remembered for this. I think that Tim Walz's legacy will kind of be wrapped up to like Tampon Tim, Goofy Tim, very quirky. Like tries to be a cool guy, but he's just like a weird boomer.
Yeah.
So I think he'll be remembered for that. He definitely can't win re-election over something like this, so it was probably wise of him to drop out. But I think that the GOP should really, really ask to take advantage of this, because how many Democrat governors are doing stuff like this? We
Right.
should be going after. We should be trying to expose every Democrat governor for this, and even Republican governors too. Fraud is fraud, so
Yeah.
be an easy thing to find out.
Oh, 100%. And I feel like maybe over the past couple months, it's really exploded as far as all these different fraud scandals that we're seeing across the country from Minnesota. I mean, California's always been there, don't get me wrong,
Right.
but more and more of it's starting to get uncovered, as well as Washington State, Maine, all these different programs, all intertwined and connected in some sort of fashion. So it's going to be really interesting over this next period of time how much more fraud actually comes out there, and whether there's going to be a change, whether people maybe say that they're done paying taxes, or how that's going to all work out. In your opinion, what broader lessons does the scandal teach conservatives about the risk of law, immigration enforcement, and unchecked government handouts?
Yeah, well, first with fraud, I think it goes to shows the inefficiency of the federal government raking in a bunch of tax dollars and allocating it to the states. There's just no way you can oversee that efficiently, and the fraud is going to be inevitable. So I think that's lesson number one, is that when we say limited government, it truly needs to be limited government. If you're going to have entitlement programs and all these other programs, you need to abolish federal taxes and let the various state governments take control of their own programs. Because at least, I in Wyoming am not paying for this fraud. I'd be paying for fraud in my own state if it was just going to like some Wyoming form of welfare. I think number two with immigration, I think it goes to show that, a lot of people come here and, everybody says, well, the people that come here work really, really hard. They contribute to the system and society. They pay their taxes. They love America. I think that's blatantly false on all points. That graphic Trump released, huge percentages of these people coming to America are taking advantage of the fruits of the land. They're taking advantage of tax dollars that were rightly earned by Americans. And it goes to show that a lot of them, a ton of them, don't actually love America. They just want to benefit off of this economic opportunity zone that is our home. And that's how we view it. I don't view it as that I can go get a good job, because as a Gen Z guy, I know that I cannot just go and get a good job. I love it because this is my home. America's my home. Wyoming's my home. And these people don't see it that way. They see it as a place where they come and they'll get more money that they can send back home. And that's probably number three, is all that money they're raking in, all these tax dollars, they're not keeping it here. They're sending it home,
Yeah.
except for the ones like driving around a Mercedes Benz in Minneapolis. But
Unreal. Yeah, I had seen that video actually. Would you be in favor? I know this is just a very hypothetical out there, but I've floated this idea out there. If you're coming into this country, obviously you should be bringing something. You should be bringing some sort of value into this country. Do you think maybe there should be like a 5-year wait before you should be even able to touch any of the welfare programs? Do you think that's too radical?
Yeah, I have pretty radical takes on immigration. I think the Hart-Celler Act of '65 absolutely destroyed any sense of rational immigration, with like chain migration and that kind of thing.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I definitely, first off, I think we need a moratorium for the next 20 years. We just need a reset on all immigration. No more immigrants, legal or illegal. Just no more. And then we need to reform our immigration program. And I think that when we do start letting in immigrants again, if that were to happen, I don't know, that's tough, a 5-year wait on whether you can come into the country. I think with most people, that should definitely be the case, but I think in some cases, if it's like a particular field, like nursing, right now we have a huge nursing demand, and I don't think that, like, in a hypothetical situation where we had a good immigration program, should we just, like, not let the nurses in if we needed nurses? No, I think that we should probably let them in, but for, like, huge amounts, yeah, I think we should go back to a quota system, like we had before the Hart-Celler Act, where we only had a certain percentage of people from certain countries, and I think we should prioritize countries, that would, more easily assimilate into our culture, like, no offense, I love all people are made in the image of God, but not all cultures are created equally, so, like, someone from Pakistan is not going to assimilate as easily as someone from Britain. They have not, if they have not not experienced generations of of Anglo institutions, of law and order, of a constitutional system, of like, I don't know, just our kind of civilization. And so and that's radical, but I think more, I don't think it's radical anymore. I mean, 2 years ago, you would have got cooked, but I think that's what we got to do.
Yeah. I would agree. And if it may be working right now, just wait until another Democrat gets in office, and then it's a whole nother story, and the borders fly right back open.
Well,
So,
that's true. I mean, you know, a lot like Mike Johnson and Amfest was bragging about all the stuff that the Congress has done, and I was just sitting there looking. I'm like, bro, you passed the least amount of bills as any Congress as I can remember since I've been watching politics. So I'm like, man, you guys say you want to win 2026, do something. As soon as Trump's out and a Democrat gets in, God forbid, yeah, the doors are going to flood open because we've only had executive orders, and those don't
right.
last. So.
Yep. 100%. And with that, I do want to move on to our next segment, and that's what lies after MAGA. With President Trump's influence still strong, what do you envision as the core of the MAGA movement's legacy once his term ends? Do you think it continues? Do you think it ends right there? What do you foresee?
Yeah, this is a huge debate. To be honest, I MAGA has definitely gone without Trump. I think Trump's personality is kind of what encapsulates MAGA. I like a lot of what JD says, and I do hope he is the ticket. I think he's the best of all the prospective candidates. I'm not gonna like say I will vote for JD because I think that a virtuous citizen should never obligate to vote for a certain person because as soon as a politician hears that you're gonna vote for him, they don't care what you got to say. So my only leverage is my vote. So with MAGA though, I think it's gone. What MAGA's legacy will be, I hope something cool happens in the next 3 years where we can look back in 20 years and say, man, remember MAGA, all the cool stuff we did. But I think sadly, in 3 years, Lindsey Graham, guys like him are going to still be in office when Trump's gone. And Lindsey Graham is the kind of guy, the kind of swamp creature by definition that we set out to beat in 2016. And so I don't know. It'll kind of depend on what Trump really decides to do over the next 3 years. I think it'd be really sad if we don't see true institutional reform that puts future conservatives on a good foundation to create more change.
One thing that I would say is I think unless pending some economic downturn or something crazy that happens like another COVID, I think JD Vance almost has it locked up. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Is if you look at Reagan was kind of a new day modern Republican. He came in there, he's kind of almost got the Trump persona a little bit, maybe a little milder. And then right after him, you had George H.W. Bush, who replaced him, and he was almost like a watered down version. Do you almost envision that being like JD Vance if he does secure the nomination?
No, I think that if JD Vance secures the nomination and wins, really it kind of depends on who he really is, because I think we're learning who JD is and what he stands for. Um, but from like what I heard at AmFest, I don't know if you were there, but that speech was probably one of the most radical speeches I've ever heard by a politician. And Trump says a lot of crazy stuff that I love, and I love it like when he calls like Tim Walz a retard and things like that. I think it's funny. That's Gen Z humor for sure. But JD, I think it kind of depends. I don't think he's weak like H.W. Bush, and he's not an institutionalist like Bush. Bush was the CIA director. He was a spook. He was the compromise to get Reagan elected to bring on the Republican establishment. Um, so I think if JD is who he says he is, and and he stands for the things he stands for as president, I think he'd be a more radical because president than Trump. I think he's far more reactionary. He's definitely more radical on social issues, particularly like upholding or defending like the persecution white people have been suffering for a long time. Like Trump sometimes talks about that, but not like JD does. So JD's in the Twitter comments like cooking people,
Yeah.
like Trump used to be. He doesn't do that no more, sadly. But I think JD would probably, hopefully, would be a more right wing president.
Yeah, I definitely hope so. And just watching JD kind of almost he's matured over this past year. He's a lot more calculated. He knows what he's doing. So I look forward to hopefully JD Vance serving as our 48th president. With that being said, as well, in light of the divides within the MAGA base and the whole Republican coalition, such as debates over foreign policy or tech issues, how can conservatives expand the coalition to include more working class and minority voters?
Well, it's going to be tough to expand the coalition. I think the coalition only existed because of our boy Charlie, and so it's going to be tough because like the only reason I trusted a lot of people in the Big Tent coalition was because of Charlie. I trusted Charlie, so I tolerated them. But there are a lot of people who just like hate Americans and American heritage and American culture in favor of like ideology. And I think it's going to be tough to get behind them without someone like Charlie, who is a unifier.
Yeah.
And who, if there isn't, I don't think anybody can replace Charlie. And so if there is going to be a coalition, it needs to unite behind Charlie's like death. And the threat that the left actually opposes to us is that they want to kill normal guys. And that's kind of what Charlie was. He was just a normal dude that liked politics, kind of like the rest of us, is that they would kill any of us like they killed him. So I think that a uniting thing like that is that the left is actually evil. Everywhere where collectivism, communism, leftism has shown its face, that country kind of just goes down the turd hole pretty fast.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tough.
Before we get into our next segment here about TPUSA and everything it stands for, I want to hear your thoughts on people like Nick Fuentes, who has definitely created some rifts within the Republican Party, within all of American politics. Your thoughts?
It's very interesting. It's kind of like a shell shock. That's how I felt ever since he's blown up since I don't know, like what, summertime, I'd say he's been on the mainstream scene. Um, and it was kind of crazy hearing all the bickering at AmFest between like Shapiro and Vivek and Tucker, literally everybody, Megyn Kelly. And it all kind of revolved around him. Um, so how the right's going to handle that, I don't know. Um, and like you go to these turning point chapters in these turning point conferences, if you have like a 70% chance that you ask a student, they're going to go, "Who's your favorite, commentator?" And they're going to say Nick Fuentes.
Mhm.
Which when I first started Turning Point, I didn't know. I actually held a meeting back in 23, like crapping on that guy for having dinner with Trump. I was like, who is this guy?" And I was like, "Why is he messing everything up by having dinner with Trump? That's not good PR." I was mad when that happened.
Right.
And I think like you talk to a lot of guys, a lot of young men, and they really like what he has to say about like how masculinity and like the basic nature of man has been crapped on forever.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't, I think we're all trying to figure out. I mean, I think that's what Amfest was trying to figure out. This Nick Fuentes.
Yeah.
Um, I've only ever really seen his clips, but from what I know, he's only on Rumble. So it's kind of crazy that he's probably bigger than any mainstream live streamer that I know. I remember seeing a graphic saying like he had the second biggest viewers on inauguration day aside from Trump, the president. And so it's just like how we're gonna deal with that. But I think that Erica Kirk's actually handling it the right way by I think she kind of told all the people at Amfest, have attaboys. The base needs to see what conversations are happening behind the scenes. We really need to talk about, America and the Israel thing and immigration and what is an American. I think that is the most important debate that we're having right now as a right wing. And I definitely think we need to fully embrace what Charlie always taught us is that dialogue is the best way to solve these problems. So like with the Nick Fuentes thing, a lot of people have criticized like Tucker and PBD and all these other people that have hosted Nick. I think the best way to beat his ideas, if they are bad ideas, is to talk to him and debate him. Because like Ben Shapiro, he made I really, if he really hates, the Nick, I think the best way to beat him is you got to confront him because if by not confronting him, he's winning. And
Right.
I think that's why I think Tucker is very smart and that he hosted Nick, and I think everybody watched that interview and then kind of adopted some of the mannerisms of Nick Fuentes, and now Tucker's blown up and really popular.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what to think about it all.
I'll be honest.
Ultimately,
I didn't really know about him until about the summertime, and I think he really exploded in the wake of Charlie Kirk's shooting because people were frustrated, they were
mm,
angry, they became a little more radicalized, and he pulled a lot of those people in after just how frustrated they were with what had happened. But with that being said, it's very early. I would agree. I think more people should take him on and have a good debate against him. I feel like Ben Shapiro could probably clobber him, but I guess we wouldn't know until that time came.
yeah, I don't know if anybody can beat him because he just kind of laughs. Like, Tucker. I think that conversation was actually really interesting. But like that Piers Morgan interview, but Piers got clobbered. Not that Piers is like the best debater ever.
Right.
But like throwing like the names, like, you're a racist or a
Yep.
bigot or whatever, that doesn't work. You got
Nope.
to confront his ideas. Probably the best person that I've seen debate him, even though he definitely lost, was Dinesh, because
Yeah.
Dinesh just confronted his ideas.
Right.
That's why I'll always be a Dinesh guy because he's just like that. But I don't know. I think to confront the Nick Fuentes issue is that debating and refining all of our ideas, including his. So I think that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah. I do want to move on to your role in TPUSA and its value for this young generation. Well, first of all, you've kind of mentioned it in the beginning, but can you tell us your specific role in Turning Point USA and how you've seen it grow into one of the most influential youth organizations?
Yeah, I'm just the chapter president at the University of Wyoming. It's over the last 5 years, it's become a very big deal in the state of Wyoming. We help push the envelope on a lot of issues. We're present at every like GOP thing that happens in the state, every right wing conference in the state. I speak everywhere, all across the state. I'm at the state legislature during our session in the winter, pushing the envelope on issues. Not that that's particularly in my role as TPUSA president at UW, but it's just kind of like those caricatures and hats that you put on as a conservative person in the state of Wyoming. But like on campus specifically, I think that the role that Turning Point has played is that it's made conservatism something appealing to the youth. I think Charlie's the biggest reason why Trump won in 2025, this last election.
Mm.
And like on my campus 5 years ago or 4 years ago, it was crazy. There's pride flags everywhere, very, very woke. And it's a totally different campus now. And it's a lot to what we've done on campus, confronting issues on free speech and transgenderism. We helped lobby to repeal gun-free zones our last session so we can pack guns on campus and protect ourselves. And so I really think that the biggest role that TPUSA students can play on their college campuses is exactly what I've done, is just talk about the issues happening on campus, push the envelope on them, go to your administrators, go to your state legislators, go to your governor, go to anybody that has any kind of institutional power. And if you're graceful and diplomatic, they'll sit down and listen. When we passed the free speech policy on my campus, it was because I had a bunch of people try to remove me for doing a pro-life event off of campus, but I had my permit, shouldn't need a permit. I was constitutionally allowed to be there, but
Okay.
I confronted the university president and said, listen, we don't have free speech on this campus and we need to do something about it. And he started a free speech committee. And I was like the only conservative on this committee. And I worked with like the director of DEI on our campus. And he actually became my number one ally in instituting free speech policies to protect the free speech of all students on campus. And now we can pretty much do whatever we want without any hindrance. And
Wow.
so, like, if you work together and you actually debate the issues, you can really, really do some cool things on your campus.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing. And like, that's how I got Charlie. Like, why would Charlie come to the middle of nowhere where the closest airport's 2 hours away, to a very, very small campus? But we got like 2,000 students, at a very small university. 20% of the student body was there. So
Wow.
anybody can do it. And I'm literally a nobody from Wyoming. My dad's a coal miner. So.
Wow.
That's remarkable what you've been able to do there at Wyoming. That's amazing work. Why is TPUSA so valuable for young Americans, especially in promoting free market values and countering campus liberalism?
Yeah, well, I think the I'll crap on Ben Shapiro a little bit, but he always says like politics is downstream from culture, and I kind of disagree with that statement. Is that everything is intermingled and it's way more complex than that statement? Is that politics in many ways is where culture starts, especially in a consumer economy like we have. Like how much has Trump influenced the culture, via his politics? I think that's ridiculous to say that it's downstream, culture's downstream from politics, or the other way around, whatever. But oh no, that was right. Um, and so I think that's why it's valuable. And institutions like academia, that's a huge cultural, and those are huge cultural institutions. And so by combating the liberalism on campus, we're impacting the culture. We're bringing Christianity back to the campuses. We're bringing first principles back to the campus. And by doing that, it's like radiation. It goes everywhere. It infects everything or whatever, however radiation works. And that's how you have to do politics. Is that conservatives think that in many ways we've lost kind of our sacred tradition, that conservatism of Edmund Burke was all about institutions and now it's all about rugged individualism, which is good too. But we forgot the institutional part, that the best way to influence the culture and actually change things is through institutions, not through being a keyboard warrior. So Turning Point's that institution where students can infiltrate, and not like in a mean sense or whatever, but in the sense that we can get involved with our universities, our state governments, our local governments, and actually make institutional change. Have conversations where conversations should be had, which is in the halls of power.
With that being said, I got one more serious question for you, and then I got a couple more lighthearted ones. So, with events like America Fest drawing massive crowds and expansions into the K-12 education, how does TPUSA empower young people to get involved in activism and student leadership?
Well, I mean, they're kind of everywhere now. In your high schools, there's like county chapters now, or you'll see like a TPUSA of something something county. I'm definitely in their colleges. But I think that if you're going to get involved, don't be a person that's going to get involved and think that every TPUSA chapter meeting and every speaker event is going to be like what you see at AmFest and SAS. That it really isn't a big light show and a party like AmFest. It's hard work, and people are going to come after you, for being a part of these chapters. So don't treat it just as a social hour. That it's Charlie died to give students like me and students like you a platform, to actually do something, for our country. And so if you're going to get involved, don't just join for social hour. Try to make change. Utilize the platform that he died to build.
Right. I got a couple fun ones here for you, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So, the first one, we touched on it earlier. What is your 2028 election prediction for Republican and Democrat presidential candidates?
Yeah, that's tough. I think JD is definitely the presidential nominee. I do think that he would probably beat anybody on the other side. Who the VP will be, I don't think it's going to be Marco. Uh, I honestly don't know. It's going to be crazy. As soon as presidential candidates start announcing, you're going to have like half the cabinet up there, a handful of governors. It's going to be like 2015 all over again.
Yeah.
But I think JD has it locked up. On the other side, we talk about the Civil War on our side, but nobody's talking about the Civil War on the other side. Is that it's establishment Democrats like Newsom against like Sanders and AOC and the Zondami, I can't even say his name, character. Or like for real, collectivists and communists against, progressive Democrats. So, and I think that if they put up Newsom versus like AOC, I think AOC wins. I really do, because they stole the primaries from Bernie Sanders twice. He should have been the nominee both
Right.
times. So I think it will be a radical Democrat this next time, like AOC. But I don't think that she'll beat like JD or Bernie or anybody like that.
Yeah. No. I don't think so either, but I think honestly she'll be worse. But I guess we'll see. There's plenty of time, three-ish years now until the election. That's like 300 years in politics. So
Right. Well, they'll start announcing November next year after the midterms.
that's
So,
insane. That's
yeah.
unreal to hear. All right, I got two more for you. What would you say your biggest highlights of being associated with Turning Point USA has been thus far?
Oh man. Definitely the first time I met Charlie, which was in Wyoming in Jackson at a fundraiser. We got me and my vice president and I sat down with him for like 45 minutes just talking about the issues we were having on campus. And I was really demoralized because it kind of sucked. I was very naive getting involved. I became president as a freshman. I didn't expect anybody would hate me being in Wyoming because I'm like, this is the most conservative state in the union. But I mean, people are crapping on me. I went on Newsmax, talking about this transgender issue, thinking it wasn't a big deal. I was barely awake for the interview on Newsmax. And next day, people are in the student union watching my interview on Newsmax, and I was just getting hate and hate and hate. But he really lifted me up and said, we need men that are actually going to do something. We need men leading because we just don't have that. Even in the conservative movement, we need way more men leading. And then probably my favorite moment of all time was getting the Student Patriot of the Year award from Charlie last December. I was his last Student Patriot of the Year. So I'll always cherish that. I can't believe I'm the last one. I definitely shouldn't be. I could believe I got it, but that was cool being on stage with him at AmFest, and I don't know, and just saying good job, being proud of me, saying you kick butt in Charlie fashion. So, and hosting him last April, that was definitely awesome too. Bringing someone that big to UW.
The last one I have for you, this is more of an oddball, but I've asked this numerous times on the show, is all right. So your five fingers produces a different type of liquid. So it can be water, it can be gasoline, any type of liquid out there. What liquids are you putting for your fingers?
White Monster,
Okay.
Mountain Dew.
Okay.
And that's tough. I don't like water, so I ain't gonna say water. Water's really boring. I never drink water. Probably, maybe, yeah, I guess like diesel or gas. You gotta have that.
Yep.
Maybe milk. I like good milk in the morning and coffee.
And a coffee. All right. Those are fun. I don't think I ever had a Mountain Dew or a Monster on there as well. So that's good. I like the diversity in that. Right. Well, folks, I tell you what, it's been a pleasure having you on. We'll have to have you on here some other time.
For sure.
But yeah, thanks for being here today. This was great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was fun.
If you want more people to find you and find out all the wonderful things you're doing, where can they find you at?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. That's about the only places I'm at. So just search Gabe Saint. I'm like the only one.
Perfect. Well, be sure to go follow him and look at all the wonderful things that he is doing at UW. Well, folks, that's all we have in store for today. Join us on Friday as we go over another surprise topic. Share your thoughts on X, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Martin Memo, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Now, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. This is The Martin Memo. The Martin Memo.